paper begins by saying, "Tears coursed down my cheeks as I drove toward my destination. For the first time in my life, I believed I had found someone who could help me with my same-sex attractions." At this point in my life, I was 44 years old, or 43, mid-40s. I was a pastor, my second pastorate, married to the person who is now my ex-wife. Her name is Ruth, and 4 children. And I was in a midlife crisis, realizing I would lose my church, my career, my wife, my children, and my associates if I could no longer contain myself as a gay man. And I found out about ex-gay ministries, Exodus, in reading Christian periodicals. No one told me about it, but all of a sudden there on the back page of, I don't know if it was Christianity Today or what magazine it was, ex-gay. And it jumped right out at me. And it was like, this is my salvation. But in saying that this is my salvation, for me, I never really felt that my sexual orientation, as I learned to call it, would change. There was something about me, even as early as age 13, that I knew I was gay, and I was gay for life. And I think what happened in part is my theology became the answer to this dilemma. And there were 2 things about my theology as a 13-year-old. I was evangelical, and I was Calvinistic. I come from the Reformed side of the Calvinism. As a Calvinist, I knew I was saved and would always be saved, so I wasn't worried about that. Jose, as a Pentecostal gay man, he had to get saved again and again. Well, okay. And I also had this teaching that God allows in our life what He will for His glory. So at age 13, when I knew I was gay, I said, okay, God has allowed this for whatever reason. I knew He'd called me to ministry. He wants to use this in my life so that I can minister to others more effectively. That's how He handled it. We have to take what we're given in life to somehow structure how we handle the difficulties in our life. The other thing that I had in my theology was the evangelical side, where Jesus Christ is my personal friend. So Jesus Christ became my personal friend, the only person I could talk to about this. I couldn't tell my father. This is 1968. I couldn't tell my pastor. I couldn't tell my friends. But I had Jesus. And if you go to my website, I would like you to read there under writings by Steve Parelli, where I talk about A Touch of Pink. I don't know if you've seen that movie. But I talked to the reader there about how my whole view on my relationship with Jesus Christ and what that means and doesn't mean has evolved. But those were the 2 things that sustained me. I'm a Calvinist. God allows what He allows. He has His purposes. And Jesus is in my life. And if Jesus is in my life, I don't need anything else. That's a good evangelical kind of way of looking at things, which is, I don't look at life that way anymore. Okay, because this really tore the whole thing up. But that was me. And so at age 44, I am driving down this road, Sparta, New Jersey, for my first meeting with an ex-gay leader. He's in a semi-mega church, a mega church for our area, a charismatic mega church. He and his wife were the leaders of the ex-gay group, and they were just lay leaders. She came, the wife who shared in the leadership, she had been sexually abused as a young person in her own home, I believe, repeatedly. And so she identified with what we were going through as wannabe ex-gays from the standpoint that she had, and there's really no one-on-one identification, but she made it that way. And that's okay. So she was there to help us Christians who were gay to become ex-gay. Her husband shared in the ministry, and they were really very 2 gracious, kind people that you could like and confide in, and it had some of the dynamics that you would look for in a supportive group. My first day, I went to this meeting to meet the husband, who screens all the people who are going to be in the ex-gay group. And he said to me that we have 3 meetings, Steve, this week, next week, and the 3rd week. And at the end of the 3rd week, I'll tell you what you need, if you lack, or if you can come into the group. Well, at the end of the 1st meeting, he said, you don't have to come to the 2nd meeting, you don't have to come to you can come in the group. And that's because everything that he was looking for, his prerequisites, I was already practicing for 20 years. For 20 years, I was having my daily devotions. For 20 years, I was practicing Christian disciplines. For 20 years, I was trying to implement the idea of dying to self and living in Christ. I was trying to implement all of these evangelical teachings that they teach in this ex-gay support group, and that he wanted to be sure the participant could affirm that these are important. Obviously, he doesn't want the ex-gay group to become a place where you meet and marry. We met and married. So it's not a dating service, but it became a dating service for us. We were 2 good, committed Christian boys, and we fell in love. But I'm going down the road at age 44. Never in my life, you are so fortunate here. You are blessed. At age 44, never had spoken to another person in my life who said they were gay. I didn't know what that was. One, I was isolated, growing up in evangelical circles, Baptist Bible College, Grand Rapids Baptist Seminary. 2, it was, I graduated from high school in 1971. This is just when Stonewall is happening, but it's happening out there in the fridges of society, not where I live. I was isolated as a gay man. But now it's 1996, 1995. I'm driving down the road, and the tears are streaming down my face. At last, I get to see somebody else who's gay, eventually. I get to talk to somebody like me. And I'm doing it in the context of my Christian faith, and not with the idea that I will necessarily, I didn't know what to expect. I just felt, this is help. And you get to the place in life where I need help. Have you ever been there? I just need help. And that was my beginning with the ex-gay experience that I had. But I was a pastor, my mid-40s, 4 children, married, and now the ex-gay movement. Now, not only did I do the ex-gay movement, okay, so let me just, so that's my way of introduction. Maybe Jose could introduce himself just a little bit. Okay, on the same note that,
Okay, my story is very similar to Stephen's in that I also had prepared for Christian ministry, and I discovered my sexuality just before going off to Bible college. Actually around age 17 or so is when I discovered my attraction to people of my gender, and yet I had already committed myself to going to Bible college and then eventually to the mission field. I wanted to be a Christian missionary. So I did take a stint of going into the military right after high school at age 18. And so in boot camp, could you imagine my experience of being in the showers with all these guys, and I'm beginning to say, oh boy, this is going to be a problem, isn't it? So speed forward throughout my Bible college years, where I of course dealt with all kinds of attractions and temptations, and thinking, when is this going to go away? As I continue seeking God, as I continue to pray, as I continue to study the Word, as I continue to prepare for ministry, I'm thinking this is going to go away. 4 years of Bible college go, 5 years actually, I took a year off. And I end up in ministry in Cleveland, Ohio, church planting. I'm a cell group pastor of a beginning ministry. And I still find myself trying to find anything I could that would be same-sex attracting. For example, any kind of literature that would be provocative in the libraries or in the video store. I'm thinking, here I am, doing ministry, and at the same time, I can't not resist my desire to be with those of my own gender. And I pulled out of ministry. This is 1993. And for 4 years, I was attending self-help groups for sexual addiction. What I found to be helpful, at least at that time in my life, was a book by Patrick Carnes, who wrote Don't Call It Love and Contrary to Love and many other books on sexual addiction. He is the guru of sexual addiction issues in the psychology world, and his book basically saved me from I don't know what, because I could have lived maybe a Ted Haggard life where I was be doing something on the side until I get caught. So thankfully, I pulled out of ministry, and through Patrick Carnes' book, I found 12-step groups that I was attending when I met Stephen in '97. So 4 years have gone by of attending 12-step groups based on the principles of AA to deal with what I thought was a sexual addiction. I thought that this is something that is contrary to my belief system and contrary to what I was trained to believe about myself. And so I'm just sexually addicted. I just gotta get this under control before it destroys my life. And if you read Ted Haggard or seen Ted Haggard on television and many others like him, they kind of went that way with the issue of their sexual orientation. So I was in that boat. I just got to get this under control. And I met Stephen when I was attending a group called Hope Ministries at Calvary Baptist Church. By 1997, I finally found something Christian, because I was thinking, why am I going to all these secular groups when I want a Christian ministry to help me? I want a Christian basis to deal with this. And so when I found Hope Ministries, I started to attend, and at the same time, I had already changed careers and was working on a master's in applied psychology. So I was going to go into school counseling. And the funny thing about it is that when I was attending the group, the Christian group, Hope Ministries, and they're basing their concepts on books by Joe Consiglio, for example, Homosexual No More, and other books like it. They're basing their thoughts on some pseudo-psychology, and as I'm doing my master's in psychology, I never really questioned, at that time in my life, is their psychology very sound? Because you see, like Stephen was saying, when you need help, you really grab on to whatever is there. And at that point in my life, I was grabbing onto my 12-step groups, and I was hanging on to Hope Ministries, thinking something has got to stick. And as Stephen said, I come from a more Pentecostal background where I felt that eventually I would find that key, that spiritual key, where God would Shazam, heal me, deliver me, as we talk in charismatic circles. I would overcome somehow. And so that's how we met in that setting. Both of us clinging for dear life for something that would give us help.
Shishir. Did I say that right? We're going to do this in English and Chinese, like every time we get done with the English, we go shishir. Is that thank you? That's what's supposed to be. Am I doing this right? Oh, that one. Thank you. I have to hold it like this. I bet. Yeah. Oh, I went to. Oh. Okay, yeah. So here we are. Let's just begin by defining who is ex-gay. According to Wayne Benson's findings, and according to our experience, a person who enters an ex-gay group calls himself ex-gay. You are ex-gay if you mentally, emotionally choose to define yourself as ex-gay. So Jose and I, though we never succeeded, we were ex-gay. We are now ex-gay. And somebody asked us today, by any chance, are you triple ex-gay? I said, well...
I think we're married.
So ex-gay is anybody who identifies as ex-gay. What did I do to be or become ex-gay? I already told you about the 3 prerequisite sessions I had to have with the counselor in order to join the ex-gay group. And then he said, well, just 1 session is fine because I'm meeting all of the prerequisites of walking with the Lord, having my Bible time, developing my spiritual discipline in my life. This person also told me that I should start counseling with Joseph Nicolosi. So I'll mention that in a minute. But first I want to show you this. Here's what Davies and Wilkins say in their book, Coming Out of Homosexuality, New Freedom for Men and Women. Our deliverance from homosexuality comes from a person rather than a method. Change is what results as we pursue a far more important and compelling goal, knowing, loving, and beholding Jesus. See, that's very much the evangelical way. I was already doing that. The counselor who was screening me said, you're doing that, Steve. And of course, it wasn't working. Here's Tim Wilkins. He's a gay man, a self-proclaimed ex-gay who has conferences in America. His title is Talking People Out of Homosexuality. Here's what he says. Tim says that he is still tempted with same-sex attractions. I do not deny it. I will devote an additional 2 hours and 14 minutes to my time with God. Now the reason I have this quote here is because that's exactly what I was doing as a teenager. When I was a teenager, I came home from school and I gave 2 hours of daily Bible study. Just in order to keep myself aligned spiritually, so I wouldn't be acting on my same-sex attractions. And when I went to Bible college, the first thing I did when I got in my dorm room, there were 2 other men in my room. It was assigned as a freshman. They weren't there. I got on my knees before God, and I said, God, I promise you 2 hours a day of quiet time so that I can keep on track spiritually. What I want to point out to you is this. All during my teen years and all during Bible college, so much energy went into just repressing my sexual feelings by using methods like this. 2 hours a day with God. In Bible college, my average was around B. When I went to graduate school, graduate school and then applied linguistics, I was a high honored student with applied linguistics. In graduate school, I was an honors student. Why? Because I wasn't spending 2 hours a day trying to keep myself on track spiritually. A lot of energy goes into repressing your sexual orientation when God would like to see you doing your career, getting your job where you want it to be, building relationships with other people, not 2 hours with Him every day. I somehow think God is looking at, Steve, I'm glad you know me, I'm glad we're meeting again today, but really, get on with your life. That's why I created you. And all the things around for you to enjoy. This is nice, meeting like this. But I don't need to see you for 2 hours a day, Steve. If you need to see me, okay, fine. But I'm quite getting along well. You see, that's what God's saying. And this evangelical thing, it becomes so devotional, so one-on-one with Jesus, and I think that we are somehow meeting needs through that relationship with Jesus. Whereas Jesus is saying, you've got it wrong. I created you a social being. I really was anticipating that these needs would be met with Jose, if you're gay, with other people, other kind of relationships. But somehow Jesus becomes this end-all in relationship, and I think it creates blind spots whereby we can't really see how to manage life. And I think Boone was talking about that to a degree this morning when he said, have faith in yourself, and keep walking towards the goal. When he said about walking, just go. Choose, chew, or what is it? Chew, yeah. Shishir, okay. Chew, or whatever, So when you just walk, just go. I said, yeah, that's how I got Jose. I wound up on his steps one day. We're meeting in ex-gay groups. And I lived way out in New Jersey. I got the Dover train, I got the subway, and I walked I don't know how far, and I finally am knocking on his door, and he said, what are you doing here? He said, you announce when you come. You don't just show up, Well, it worked. It's always easier to ask for forgiveness than get permission, you see. So, I'm sorry, I won't do this again. I didn't know. But I was spending 2 hours a day with God to bring in control what is very natural and normal, our sexual desires. And God is just saying, I gave you those desires. Why don't you go out and cultivate them and enjoy them instead of sitting here and trying to repress them. So what did I do to become ex-gay? The 2 hours a day from age 13 through Bible college, like a monk. I went to regular ex-gay group meetings. Then, the second bullet, I had weekly private phone sessions with therapist Joseph Nicolosi for 9 months. Joseph Nicolosi is probably the #1 counselor that evangelicals point us to in order to get counseling. He's a Catholic by profession of faith. He's an excellent counselor. I really I really feel like Joseph Nicolosi was in my life at that time for a very important reason. He connected me. Well, let me just see what I have there. Nicolosi is co-founder of the controversial National Association for Research and Therapy of Homosexuality, NARTH. You can read all about that on the internet. Joseph Nicolosi got me involved with New Warriors. New Warriors is an international straight organization that mentors and brings men together into small groups while employing dynamic therapeutic methods for healing woundedness. This was in the 1990s in America. The men's movement, it was called, included things like New Warriors. And it's men getting together in the West in order to figure out how did we become so wounded. You know, it really was a very positive experience. That was good too, New Warriors. But what Joseph Nicolosi was doing with me, my counselor, is getting me involved with men in what we might call normal, healthy relationships. Because the reparative therapy says what happened is I never connected fully, completely with men, with my father, with my brother, with boys my age as I was growing up. And so then at age 13, when when puberty struck in and I discovered I'm a sexual being, at age 13 I began to homoeroticize my desire, my need to have this male connectedness. So I didn't get male connectedness from age 0 to 12. Now when I'm 13, I'm going to get this male connectedness by being sexually with other boys my age, teenagers, and so on. That's the theory of reparative therapy. So the idea of reparative therapy is we have to go back and repair what I didn't get between ages 0 and 12, connectedness with men. And that's why he's having me go to New Warriors to connect with men. I also went to the Exodus Northeastern Regional Ex-Gay Conference, 2 conferences. The second one I brought Jose with me. I was on an almost day-to-day basis networking and spending hours and even days, sometimes I took trips, with an ex-gay leader and with ex-gay clients of Joseph Nicolosi. Joseph Nicolosi put me in touch with 3 other clients. Nicolosi, his office was in California. I'm in New Jersey. The counseling was weekly by phone for 1 hour. It would have continued more than 9 months, except that at that point I found out my insurance wouldn't pay for it because it was by phone, it wasn't in person. I said, I can't do this anymore. He put me in contact with 3 other men that he was counseling. An individual in Chicago, 1 in New Jersey, and 1 in Massachusetts. And us 4 men would get on the phone, always one-on-one, and we would compare notes. We were all gay men, professional men, and we were in the same boat, struggling. One other man was married like me. He also had 4 children. He eventually had me to his home. I met his wife, his children. This was still when we were in the stage of trying to no longer be ex-gay. But later we'll tell you where these men are now. So I did that. I created new friendships with area clergy. I opened up to 3 area clergy right where I was pastoring about my homosexual struggles. I did not speak to any clergy from my own denomination. That would have been suicide. You understand that? Okay, so I was smart enough not to do that. I didn't feel safe. I didn't feel like they would help me. I felt they would begin the triad of, you've got to get out of the ministry. But I opened up to other clergy who were similar in faith, but of other denominations, 3. And that was some of the best fellowship I had when I started being honest with fellow clergy about what I was struggling with. All 3 of them told me their struggles. It was amazing. But I was doing that, 1, out of a real need. I wasn't just following good instruction here from my counseling session. I was so desperate at this point in life. I was latching on to people. If it was another pastor who could help me, pastor. If it was an ex-gay group, help me. If it's a professional counseling, weekly counseling, help me. I'm 45, 44, 43, and I am in midlife crisis. I'm going to crash and I'm going to burn. And this is what I was doing. Homosexuality is an emotional disorientation caused by arrested or blocked emotional development. There's the definition which I explained earlier. He, the ex-gay, will have learned how to recognize and manage these wounded emotions. So as a wounded young man, never having connected completely in a healthy way with my father, my brother, etc., I will have to recognize this woundedness, deal with it, repair it. And once I've done that, I'm now going to have these wonderful heterosexual feelings. After how many years together now? You would think I had gotten enough maleness in my life.
13 years together.
13 years together. I should be have moved on by now.
We should be straight by their standards.
Yeah, we should be straight. We've never considered divorce. Murder, yes. Divorce, no. So, I worked out at the gym adjacent to my home, often twice daily, and took up tennis lessons. This was all to make me straight. I read, yeah, I know, that was hard, let me tell you, that was hard. Wow, when I first started going to the gym, that was like eye candy, you know.
Is that supposed to make you straight?
I was a good boy. This gym was right next to my church in a small community in New Jersey, and I was a good boy. I read, meditated upon, and applied all the XK material I could obtain. And so the process of the development of homosexuality and change comes full circle. What was broken, we try to fix. The problem started in a relationship and is resolved through relationships. I can't overemphasize this point. I have passed the ultimate test of recovery, says William Consiglio. I have passed the ultimate test of recovery, engaging in casual conversation in a locker room with a naked man while maintaining eye contact. Now, if you can do that, you're straight. You know, I was doing that all through high school because I didn't want anybody to know I was gay. Really, I remember a high school gym class. I don't know. We had in high school, you know, you have one big shower room, 4 walls, and 3 showers on each wall. And wow, when I was first introduced to that, I literally would stand facing the wall and I was praying, almost in tears. Jesus, help me not to get an erection. Jesus, help me not to get an erection, honest to God. So, I mean, I was engaged in casual conversation a lot with naked. It didn't mean anything all those years to me. I don't know how that proves to be the test to being, the ultimate test of recovery. See, here's what recovery Here's what recovery and change is, and we're going to say this later. The ex-gay movement, and they've been called on the carpet. In the last 10, 15 years, the ex-gay movement has been called on the carpet, and they have changed some of their phraseology, but the ex-gay movement has been, right along, bait and switch. Do you have that expression here in Singapore? Bait and switch? Bait and switch is, I give you one appeal, I bring you in on one premise. Once you get in, everything is changed. And that's the ex-gay story. The premise is, look at their titles, Coming Out of Homosexuality. How Jesus changes the homosexual.
Consiglio wrote a book that said, Homosexual No More.
Homosexual No More. I mean, these are the books I'm buying as a pastor with these promising titles, and we'll show you later. But as you read the fine print, when they say change, when they say no more, when they say coming out of homosexuality, they are only talking about repression, change of lifestyle. There's no such thing in all of my studies and all of meeting ex-gays of a real change in terms of sexual orientation. You don't change sexual orientation. So, poster boy versus is there such a thing? Here's what Joseph Nicolosi told me one day on the phone. He said, Steve, because I was doing everything. I was doing everything. My heart was in it. You see, nobody wanted to change any more than me. My pastorate, my children, my wife. I want the victory. Someday you may be a poster boy for reparative therapy and ex-gay ministry. My therapist told me that with all his heart. He said, Steve, you're one of my best clients. And someday you're going to be the shining example of what it means to be ex-gay. He was really holding out for that. Now I go out all over the world saying, as much as I like Joseph Nicolosi, and I do as a person, it's just not happening. Is there really such a thing as ex-gay? I don't really think there is.
So,
Go ahead.
so as we look at the psychological aspect of it, the American Psychiatric Association opposes psychiatric treatments such as reparative therapy or conversion therapy, which is based upon the assumption that homosexuality per se is a mental disorder, or based upon an a priori assumption that a patient should change his homosexual orientation. And in doing that, the APA has joined many other professional organizations that either oppose or are critical of reparative therapies, including the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Medical Association, the American Psychological Association, the American Counseling Association, of which I'm a member, the National Association of Social Workers.
Okay, that's our introduction, give you kind of a background of how we were involved. And Jose was very much involved in his process. When we met at the Hope Ministries, Calvary Baptist Church of Manhattan. That was the Christian, but he was going, you tell him, how often you were going?
Well, I was going every single day to my self-help groups, and there are a plethora of sexual addiction support groups. So there was Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous, there was Sexually Compulsives Anonymous, there was Sex Addicts Anonymous, there was Sexaholics Anonymous, and did I say Sexually Compulsive Anonymous? Yes. So at least 4, maybe 5 different groups exist, each one of them working on sexual addiction. I was attending those groups on a daily basis, plus there was a support group at Tim Keller's church, which is a large Presbyterian church, and they had a group also for Christians who were struggling with any kind of sexual sin. And Stephen got to attend that group with me because I turned him on to it. So, plus there was a Catholic group called Courage, which was started by Father Paul in Manhattan, and he had a support group for Catholics who are gay. And in that group, I met someone who actually before Stephen could have been a candidate for a relationship, I don't know. Anyway, but in that group, I met
I beat that guy out.
Yeah, good for you. You know, I really was looking for everything that was possible out there. And again, in those support groups, we're going to talk about it later, there's a big difference between how to deal with this issue from a 12-step perspective and how to deal with it with a reparative therapy perspective. But both are not necessary. Both, neither a 12-step group or reparative therapy is going to change someone's orientation.
So while I'm trying to spend 2 hours a day in devotion with God, Jose is taking 2 hours at the end of every day to go to some kind of self-help support group. You can see how this gets to be taxing. It really is. It's sad. It really is sad. Okay, so now we want to give you our 8 evaluations of the ex-gay movement in America within the evangelical context as we have come to experience it personally and in our readings, okay? So here is the our first evaluation. First, the ex-gay movement's origin, mid-1970s, is rooted in traditional cultural norms rather than good Bible exegesis and the social sciences. I came to this conclusion at some point in my thinking. It is a faith-based knee-jerk reaction to the exploding gay culture on the American scene. Here's what I think happened. The 1960s in America, as perhaps you know, was the age of the hippies, right? It was the age of young people throwing off the restraints of the 1950s. And in the 1960s, America went through a real cultural upheaval in terms of its traditions, its norms, its values, so that if you were the traditional mainstay of the population, you were running scared. I saw my parents running scared. What's happening to America? And so by the end of the 1960s, when you have Stonewall, and by the beginning of the 1970s, you now have gays coming out openly, you already have a mindset as a conservative, evangelical American, God save the Queen kind of thing. Oh, we don't have a queen, do we? Yeah, God save the Queen. You have this evangelical conservative identity, which you equate as being a real good American. And now, as soon as the gays appear, you don't even think, well, what is this all about? You don't think social science. You don't think it could be my son or my daughter. You just think we're going to hell in a handbag in this country, and so we get a knee-jerk reaction, and that's simply this. Jesus Christ can save them all. Jesus can turn us around. And I really believe that the ex-gay movement is a knee-jerk reaction to conservative evangelicals afraid, running fearfully in America for the sake of their own country. I believe that's a big part of it. So, the second bullet. Ex-gay ministries mindlessly proof text everything to support their claims. They did that. You know what I'm saying by proof text? They found the verses that say they're right, and they ran with that. Evangelicals focused on and popularized stereotypical myths about gays.
The unhappy gays.
Yeah, you could. Yeah. Here we go. Oh wait, did I? Oh, I think I missed something. Okay, just trust it, right? Okay. However, pro-gay theologians are correct in saying that this passage, Genesis 19, Sodom and Gomorrah, does not provide a strong argument against prohibiting all homosexual acts. Yeah, I think that's out of sequence. That's okay. What this is, because I really wanted to be at this slide, with the unhappy gays. But, although, no, they both go with this. Okay, they both go. I'm trying to illustrate now my two bullets. The first bullet here is a faith-based knee-jerk reaction, and the second bullet is proof texting everything, and that illustrates this. Here's Bob Davies, okay? And this is from his book. And look at the right, hey, this is oh, but I'd have to do this, right? Anyways, on the right column, I can show myself. Okay. Okay, so, okay. This is like same-sex sex, you know? Same gender. Is it male, female? I don't know, but anyways. Okay, so, in 1997, okay, Frank Wharton started Love in Action. I'm going to say the first ex-gay organization, okay? In 1979, this Bob Davies, who writes his book, Coming Out of Homosexuality.
Love in Action was 77, 1977.
Oh, okay. Okay, we'll argue about that later, you know, how husbands do that. But anyways, in 1993, he writes this book in which he does say, hey, you know what? Pro-gay theologians, they're correct. For about 20 years now, 15 years now, pro-gay theologians have been writing. And one of the things they wrote about was Genesis 19, Sodom and Gomorrah, saying it's a story about hospitality and about rape and about abuse. And really, if it's a story of misogyny. Am I saying that right? Misogyny. Thank you, I got that right. Okay. And it has nothing to do about homosexuality. Now, Bob Davies is saying, you know what? Yeah, Genesis 19, Sodom and Gomorrah. That's not a proof text for Exodus. That's not a proof text for ex-gay groups. We've got that all wrong. I would like to know if he was saying that in 1979. When everybody in the 1970s, when the evangelicals were so up and ready to save America and every gay man like me, I wonder what they were thinking Sodom and Gomorrah was about. I can tell you because most of them are still saying what Sodom and Gomorrah about. It's the very reason why we have to have ex-gay groups, to save America from God's final judgment. So, but here's an ex-gay author. Here's a man who says he still believes that homosexuality is wrong. And I'll still counsel ex-gays, to come out of homosexuality. But Bob Davies is saying, we can't use Genesis 19, though, as a proof text. So I'm trying to show you how that, oh dear. Oh, did I just turn it off? I pushed the bottom button. Oh, it came back. Thank you. I'm not even a top, and I pushed the bottom button. Oh wait, it's not about tops and bottoms. It's not on your top or on your bottom. It's not, It's not about categories. Okay. Oh, here we go. Now here's the other. This is to illustrate the other bullet. I was present in church. You can tell, right? I think Susan told us you only have to listen to half the sermon this morning. Because half's in English and half's in Chinese. And Jose said, I always listen to half the sermon. Okay. So Tim LaHaye, I read this book in 1978. And Tim LaHaye, do you know his book on end times? What's his? It's sold by the tens of thousands in America.
Late Great Planet.
No. You know his end times? Left Behind. Okay, he wrote Left Behind. Well, in the 70s, he tried to save us gays. And I guess he's given up on that. But I read his book, and he listed what he called the myths of being gay. And I read those seriously as a young man. And, believing an evangelical author, I said, okay. Everything he said I couldn't be as a gay man, because they don't have it. You can't be happy and married as a gay man. You can't have your homoeroticism and be happy. Everything he said, and you'll lose out on family, or because you can't have children, or whatever. Everything he said. Oh, and it's a drug scene, or it's a mix. I'm not quoting him exactly. I don't remember what he said. But everything he said, I said, yeah, that's right. But everything he said is nothing about me. All those myths he said were myths. They're all truths in my life. You know, I'm happy. I'm married. I'm productive. I'm still, it just, so there you go. I did it again. You know what? I'm a little bit dyslexic. Dyslexic. I can't even say it. I really am. I do opposites. Twice today, I entered the woman's room. I did it at my hotel lobby. I haven't done this in years. I walked into the woman's room. And then this morning when I had to use the bathroom, I walked into the women's room and I read the sign. It said ladies in there. Ladies. You have a sign in the women's room, by the way. It says ladies, and I don't know what the rest of it says. I didn't stay around to read it. I got out as soon as it said ladies. And I'm thinking, why am I doing this twice today? And part of it is I am dyslexic. Left and right and left. And the other could be, the only answer I could come up with is I spent 4 weeks in Kerala. And most of the men in Kerala wear skirts, you know that. And all these icons, it's the best I could come up with. All these icons, it's this, the gender with the skirts. And the men, you have that icon. And I said, I bet you that's it. That's it. Yeah, it goes to show you why these icons are even gender, In Kerala, the men wear skirts. Anyways, okay.
So as we go into the next point, the second point is that they use psychology. The use of psychology is selective, and it appears to overly dominate for a religious movement that otherwise rejects most of modern psychology's findings on homosexuality. So it's interesting that they would actually say, oh, let's look at Freud's psychology of psychosocial development, psychosexual development. And they will employ some Freudian ideas that even Freud himself have rejected later on in his research. So their selective use of psychology upon the heels of their inadequate exegesis of the Bible, as Stephen illustrated, is indicative of the movement's the fact that it's culturally biased, that they really have an agenda. They are using scripture, as Stephen said, to prove text, and on top of that, they are picking and choosing some psychological research and saying, oh yeah, this is what causes homosexuality.
Yeah, the whole psychology thing is like, I grew up in the 60s and 70s. When I went to Bible college, we had some good courses on psychology, and counseling was very good. But I was still living in an era where most Christians didn't trust psychology. And now you have this whole ex-gay movement, and they're going to use psychology to fix you when they don't even try. When they come from an evangelical mindset that says psychology shouldn't even be trusted. So they're very selective here. All of a sudden, reparative therapy, which is really a psychological approach, is going to save the day, but we don't trust psychology. Oh, but we're using psychology. Oh, so if we're using psychology, why don't you read all the other psychologists who say it's okay to be gay? Well, we don't trust that psychology. You see, it's very selective, and it's really quite hypocritical. Especially if you tie them with that, boy, we're such Bible people. Well, you know what the Bible says, and but we can use psychology in this case. But we really don't trust psychology because most of the time psychology doesn't agree with the Bible, and we have the Bible, so we know what's right. So we'll just take this little bit of psychology and we'll use it to fix you as a gay person, and all this other psychology, that's all wrong. What kind of a mindset? When I was in Kerala, I met with a professor, a senior professor in his Bible college, a fundamentalist Bible college. When he heard who and what we were doing, he secretly, under the cover, got together with Jose and I and said, you can't let anybody know. And of course we don't. But he wants to work with us and he's going to help distribute books. But he said to me, Steve, as we compared notes, one thing I found out about fundamentalism, as he teaches in these schools in Kerala, is they really don't want to think. And he says that I've asked other fundamentalists, why don't you want to think? And he gave me some of the reasons. One reason I don't want to quote because there's a source to that, and that can tie back to everything will come together. But so to me, the whole ex-gay movement has this element of hypocrisy. We don't trust psychology, but we'll use this psychology.
For example, even when they quoted Spitzer later on, Spitzer, who did a study on psychology, why people are homosexual, he in 1970s, and then later he wrote, he did research on people who claimed to have changed, and even his research, recent research in the 1990s, which interviewed people who claimed to have changed, he said even that was misused by the ex-gay movement to say, oh, you see, there are people that are changing. And Spitzer said, no, my research was to find out the claims of those who say they have changed, not to prove that they have changed. That's what the person reports, and then I'll just give you the research. So it's very interesting how they will actually run to the research and pull from the research whatever it is that, again, proof texting, even from psychology.
Cherry picking.
Cherry picking what it is that can back up their point of view without looking at the majority, the vast predominance of the psychological evidence, which is orientation is something that does not change.
Okay, our third evaluation. Well, the movement promises change and healing on the surface, its leaders readily admit that these changes are external and behavioral only, which we mentioned earlier. Change and healing is change in behavior and lifestyle, not in sexual orientation for the ex-gay movement. Coming out of homosexuality is to enter into a sexual no man's land, not to enter into heterosexuality. The movement promotes this image of change on the cover of its books, in its sound bites, in its newsletters, and in its public relations. See the title here on the cover, Pursuing Sexual Wholeness. How Jesus Heals the Homosexual is the subtitle. See it right there in the small print? That's a bait and switch. The ex-gay movement misleads the average layperson with its highly visual use of words and phrases like ex-gay and change. See, even the idea of ex-gay, that's a label that promises more than it can deliver. Change and healing and coming out of homosexuality. How ex-gay leaders speak of change. Now we'll just go through a couple of quotes. We can alternate here, okay? You want to read this one?
Oh yeah. Tim Wilkins, in his article of Why I Won't See Brokeback Mountain, he says, I'm still tempted with same-sex attractions. I do not deny it. So, as a matter of fact, he's probably staying away from the movie just so that he isn't tempted.
Have you seen Brokeback Mountain? Yeah. Yeah. I remember when it came out. It was great. We went and saw it. It was okay. But Tim Wilkins, he won't see it. Mm-hmm. Why? And yet he leads conferences on how to come out of homosexuality. I can't see that movie. Okay. Bob Davies, in his book, a strong, even passionate lust when looking at an attractive member of the opposite sex on the beach. This certainly is not our goal in being healed. You got to laugh at that. He said, I would think this is healing. I walk down the beach now and I just look at guys, and he does too.
I won't deny it.
And sometimes we do it together. Have you know the phrase meanwhile? We caught that in an American movie. Meanwhile, when you're walking with another gay man, if there's a cute gay man walking by, you say to each other, meanwhile. Meanwhile, there's eye candy walking by, you know. So we're helping. Yeah, meanwhile, as we're talking, meanwhile, there goes the eye candy. Don't miss it, you know. So I would think healing for me is to be able to walk down the beach, and instead of looking at guys, I'm looking at girls. I'm now heterosexual. I'm getting turned on. Wow, this is great, you know. But no, Bob Davies says, oh, when we talk about getting healed, we really don't mean that when you walk down the beach, you get turned on by looking at the opposite sex. That's not healing. And he goes on in the same passage to explain, well, because that would be Christian. That's lost. I mean, that's lost.
We don't lust.
So, you know, so how could that be healing? It's bizarre. The ex-gay movement is really bizarre. Okay, so here's another quote.
Here's Consiglio. By the way, Bill Consiglio actually spoke at and participated in Hope Ministries with us there in Manhattan. So I got to meet him and see him in person. And he says in his book, Homosexual No More, what do I mean by recovery? Recovery is being able to go on with minimal, bothersome homosexual feelings, avoiding all homosexual behavior. Recovery means the ability to manage. Consiglio also says, my experience as a Christian therapist is that overcomers still experience homosexual feelings, temptations, tensions, conflict, or difficulty. I mean, when he spoke with us, he would understand when we were saying to him, listen, but I still feel this way. He knew that those feelings weren't going away. But his key word is to manage. And that these little feelings would be some little bothersome feelings that will come and go. But he could not, in all honesty, say these feelings will go away.
Andrew Komeski, in his book Pursuing Sexual Wholeness, says, while giving a series of lectures himself, I felt consumed with a longing for a distinctly masculine love. I ached for it. I felt frustrated. I felt tempted to entertain lustful masculine images, where you repress your feelings of homosexuality, same-sex feelings, and you call that being changed.
And Bob Davies, in his book, says many former homosexuals eventually go on to experience marriage. We have talked to many ex-gay people who are married and still struggle with homosexual feelings and behavior. They live feeling trapped in a heterosexual facade while secretly longing for same-gender sexual intimacy.
So here we have the married ex-gay man. Now here's this. I have this in my footnote. From my own marital experience, I was married for 17 years and then I separated. From my own marital experience, when I say married to a woman, the ex-gay movement, in my opinion, by encouraging ex-gays to marry, sexually cheats the heterosexual spouse in the bedroom. I never once desired my spouse like I do my same-sex partner. I never once undressed her with my eyes. She had to know and feel this at some sad, confused level.
Cause of homosexuality in part as the individual's failure to embrace his or her gender. And the boy who fails to embrace accepted masculine traits and interests is, according to the ex-gay movement, rejecting his maleness and will, by his own fault and by default, fail to bond with his peers and male role models. In turn, due to a lack of male connectedness, he will, during his adolescent years, homoeroticize his growing male hunger, which will lead to homosexual acts. That's their theory. If you don't accept yourself as male, you don't see yourself as male, and you hunger for the maleness of others, and therefore you pursue the maleness through sexual interaction. That's the theory. It's hogwash because there's no psychological research that backs that up. Is the boy rejecting society's culturally correct definition of his masculinity? Now here's the whole issue of masculinity and gender roles. Or has society rejected the boy for his culturally incorrect style of masculinity? In other words, does the boy decidedly reject society's prescribed masculinity by purposely choosing interests that society deems inappropriate? Or Has the boy just naturally followed his own interests, though wildly different from society's prescribed norms for boys? A boy who likes art instead of, let's say, football. You know, is he rebelling against society, or is he just following his natural interests? Anyone can observe the data. First, the boy and his less than masculine interest is and his pursuits. That's 1. 2, society's prescribed gender roles. And then 3, the boy standing outside of the circle of society's approval. However, in interpreting any data, one must be aware of his premises and biases, so that the conclusions are not skewed. The evangelical XK movement has told us where their bias lies. They assume he's rebelling, he's not following the norms. Here we go. Here's the bias. Gender realities are somehow rooted in God and God's creation. Gender isn't merely a cultural prescription. That's straight from the literature, the XK literature. Struggles often reveal to us the grave problems that arise out of an unaffirmed gender identity. So that's their bias, that your lack of gender identity is causing you to be homosexual. And this is a study. And then here's another study. A major study conducted in 1981 cites one significant recurring theme among the hundreds of homosexual adults who were interviewed. A recollection of being different from one's own gender peer group in childhood. The study gives no reason for this difference, and that wasn't its intent. And on the other hand, one could just as easily interpret data to mean society is rigid and unrelenting in its norms, holding its male-female gender roles as absolutes, so that the boy who has not in the least bit rejected masculinity nor male role models, but rather he's rejected society. In its intolerance, and ignorance, is unforgiving and therefore has rejected and marginalized the boy. Alright, the XK movement fails to explore this alternative interpretation. In other words, do we give the boy a hard time because he's different? It's not that he's different and therefore society, he's rejecting gender roles. He's just different and society is therefore rejecting him. That's another way of looking at it.
Reparative therapy says, my problem is I constantly rejected my gender role growing up. I rejected playing football. I did play football. I rejected doing what men do. And because I rejected doing these things, I am now gay. The truth is, society has a problem with gender roles. Boys have to do this, girls have to do that. The truth is, society is the one that's intolerant or ignorant. And so we take this data that a boy is different. I wrote poetry, I played the piano, I had the star lead in drama club my senior year. My dad wouldn't come, he was so embarrassed. You know, so was Dad rejecting me, or was I rejecting the male role, and who's rejecting who, and does this really cause a person to be homosexual? It's really kind of skewed the thinking. And you have your biases and premises around this. It has nothing to do. And I had to think all of this through. Okay, so 5th. We'll just mention this. Honesty from group members in the XK groups is often the missing factor in the dynamics of XK meetings. They aren't honest. Jose, when he told you he went to these secular groups, here we show the difference. The secular self-help groups are honest. Rigorous honesty is demanded in those groups. In our XK groups, there wasn't honesty. And the problem is this. By honesty, I mean the members would come once a week and we're supposed to tell whether or not we failed that week or how we're progressing. And you know what? Because you're in this evangelical Sunday school mentality that God is making me better, everybody's afraid to say they had sex that week with anonymous sex that week. You're supposed to be getting better. You're supposed to be good Christians. And we're all trusting the Lord. I found out that in the ex-gay meetings, there wasn't honesty for growth. I went to his secular, I would go with it to his secular groups. And there was honesty, left and right. It was unbelievable. I said, Jose.
And when you say secular, you're referring to the 12-step groups, which are not religious and they're not Christian. So
yeah, they're non-religious groups, I should say.
Not based on any.
And there's 12-step self-help groups, the ones that he named. You know,
Sex Addicts Anonymous, Sexaholics Anonymous, Sex Loving Addicts Anonymous, Sex and Romance Anonymous, Sexually Compulsives Anonymous.
I went to all those groups with him because I just loved being with Jose. But I was seeing a difference between non-religious groups and religious groups. We tend to hide as religious people.
Yes.
It's the dynamic of what we are. Every group has its own dynamics. It's not necessarily a fault. It just is a truism. You know? How many of you here are really going to be, you know, deathly honest? And you shouldn't be, because that's not the nature of this meeting necessarily. But in our ex-gay groups, it was supposed to be, but we were too church-like. So that was the difference. Here's the sixth evaluation. The evangelical ex-gay movement makes claims of success that go unsubstantiated. That's different from Hope, the group that we went to. Here's what they say on their website. Now, Hope of Calvary Baptist Church, Manhattan, New York. That's where Jose and I met. And I was going to a support group in New Jersey, and now I started going to the support group in New York City. And here's what they say on their website. Over the years, we have seen many lives turned around and have been greatly encouraged by so many individuals who have won the victory and gained a new freedom. We do believe that Jesus Christ is the healer and worker of miracles, and we have seen many of those miracles of change among us. I almost, that's a straightforward line as far as what we experienced. Nothing on the website, first of all, substantiates their claim. They don't have any stories, even anonymous stories. Jose and I attended this group for 8 months. It was only 8 months, but the group then was 2.5 years already in existence. Okay, and and years later at a gay bar, someone who had formerly attended Hope said he was done attending the ex-gay meetings. On another occasion, another gay man. Again, you see, we gave up the ex-gay meetings and started going to the gay bars. We got more truth at the gay bars than we did the ex. We met another man from Hope. He said, "Oh yeah, I used to go to Hope. I gave up on Hope." There was one married Hope member who we stayed in touch with. I remember him. He eventually was divorced. Of course, that doesn't. We're not saying there was a fourth Hope attendee who kept in touch with us by phone and in person. He goes back and forth to accept it. It just wasn't working at Hope. I mean, when they say on their website that last line, we have seen many of those miracles of change among us. We didn't see one of them. And the leader of the group didn't even tell us the 9 months that we were there. While we were there, the leader of the group, who had been the leader from its inception, James, yeah, he didn't say, "By the way, stay on because we have this story from 2 years ago and this from 9 months ago, and don't give up because this person was healed." I mean, it just didn't exist. And you want to know what? Here's what's happening. This is my opinion. The average evangelical in the pew is getting this kind of hype, getting this kind of hype from the ex-gay movement. My daughter has written me and said, "Dad, will you please come to this?" I mean, my daughter, just a few years back.
Yeah. She's inviting us to the Benny Hinn.
Come to Benny Hinn because Dad, you'll get healed, you'll get this. And she writes, "Dad, we know many gays who have been changed. They don't exist. But they get this story from the pulpit, and they believe it's so. And they read this on the website, and they believe it's so. It just doesn't exist." Okay? Granted, our findings are incomplete and unscientific, but that's the point. Has Hope validated its claim of miracles and changes among us? No. According to their website, apparently not, because they don't substantiate it. Their website doesn't report any findings, and Jose and I have never participated in a survey conducted by Hope. Oh yeah, Hope should, here's a survey. You were with us for 9 months, it just doesn't exist. They make these claims. Okay, so my fellow clients with Joseph, not one of the 3 clients that I knew who were in therapy with Joseph succeeded. Sudden healing from homosexuality, it doesn't happen. And then Davies in his books, he writes about the thousands and the hundreds and the numerous, but then when you read how he describes them, thousands have been changed. What? But this is how he qualifies it. On the road towards recovery, you see?
They're still in the process.
So you hear these reports, we have 1,000 ex-gays on the road towards recovery. What does that mean? They're in the intensive care, they're on life support machines, and they probably will die next week. But that's on the road to recovery. This is the kind of hype you get from these ex-gays. And my daughter sits in church and she hears an ex-gay speaker come and he says, "We have thousands on the roads to recovery." And you hear thousands, and you hear positive, you hear success. It's all lies in the name of the church. Okay, so there's thousands. So, Exodus test for change. Now let me just, here we have, I went to one of the conferences in New England, a 3-day conference. And they said, and there was a group, like 4 times the size of this group, ex-gays from all over northeastern America, from Washington, D.C. up into Maine. And there we sit. And they announced from the platform, if you have been 3 years without having sex, same-sex sex, then you come forward, we're going to take your picture, because we're going to put your picture in the New York City magazine. And they did. They took out a full page, and under they said, ex-gays who had been healed. Now, I was at the meeting when they took that picture, and the only qualification they said was, if you've been 3 years without having sex, with same-sex sex, we want you to be in this picture, we're going to put it in the New York City paper. I was there, I heard them. And I thought to myself, oh, by the way, I didn't qualify. I wasn't in the picture. I was this pastor. I was still a pastor. Let me tell you, the last 3 years of pastoring, I think 3 times I had sex with a guy. And I'm going to tell you, that was excruciating. And one of these 3 pastor friends that I told you about, I went to him and I told him how I had fallen. But anyways, so I couldn't be in that picture, But I had to ask him about. I could have been in the picture 3 years earlier. I had been 15 years without sex. I could have been in the New York. I could have been in that picture. But I was falling apart in my mid 40s, and I wasn't keeping my vows to my wife, at least on 3 occasions towards the end of my pastorate. That was another reason why I left the ministry. I had to leave the ministry. I couldn't. It was awful to stand in the pulpit on that Sunday morning and know that you failed that congregation in the Lord that week. That was devastating for me. I know pastors who they're gay, they live the lifestyle, and they say, Steve, it's okay, and it's okay. They're fine. But that's because they're okay between them and God. They know that people don't understand it, so that's how they live. And okay, I couldn't do it. Anyways, that was the excess test for change. 7, a realignment of the will and the regulation of prayer. Bible reading, church attendance, accountability. I told you about that already. That's the evangelical key for recovery. Your walk with the Lord Jesus Christ. My 31, life in Christ, you're in a disaster. I wanted to tell you about this one girl, this one lady here. Oh, time's up. See this lady? She spoke at the conference on Romans 6 through 8. And I said, Lord bless you. She was a lesbian. She was all excited about Jesus and how dying to self. And I said to myself at that conference, I said, you know what? I've been doing Romans 6, 8 for 30 years. She's all excited about this new discovery of dying to self. And I said, God bless her. But she was preaching with real conviction. She needs another 10 years testing this out before she tells us all how it works. Because if I was up there speaking, I'd have to say, but I was still a believer and trying to, so that's that. The last thing is this. Close male relationship is what they need. And here's a book, The Wounded Male, you can read about it in the paper. And Joseph Nicolosi was good. I told him I had this male hunger. Could I spend time with Jose? And Joseph Nicolosi said, Steve, if you asked me this 3 years earlier, I would say no. But I found out that gays need holding. And I said, I want Jose to hold me. And he said, Jose can hold you all night. Friday night, Saturday, Sunday night. For 3 days, Jose can hold you. Jose started holding me. We haven't stopped since. And I'm not cured. Conclusion, it just doesn't work. I mean, wow, isn't Jose hot? I've not read one ex-gay testimony where the so-called ex-gay male refers to sex with women with the same exciting and earth-shattering sexy hot terminology that he had used when speaking of the same sex attractions prior to his career. I've heard these guys tell their stories. These guys say, oh man, I used to, in the summertime when they take off their shirt, oh Lord, I can't take off their shirt. Oh, but now you know what? I have this girl, and we meet on Friday nights and we talk about the newspaper. He just,
big difference.
It's big difference. He wasn't,
He's not so excited about.
But he tells you about when he was living in sin. Yes. He's almost getting excited on stage, right. About remembering. But now I got this girl in my life, and she's like a sister. Yeah. I love her like my mother. So homosexuality exists. It's a powerful dynamic. It's real. Get on with it, evangelicals. Sex is sex. And I'm attracted to Jose sexually. There's chemistry. Believe it or not, I know I tell him I have the Charlie Brown look, but he's attracted to me. He likes me. It's great. You know, he comes home at the end of the day, and he looks at me, and he just gets this little glow still, you know? And then he does the little things that I know means that means, and we get it on still. It's wonderful. Sex is a gift from God. And it just so happens that my sexual, it goes towards guys. And I got a guy. And let me tell you what, half of those temptations that I was facing before I got a guy, they don't exist now. Why? Because I got a guy. You know, and we allow for some of the things that are the turn-ons, you know, this and that. And it's wonderful. Well, we could ask the XK movement what the fuss is all about over sex. But I think we already know the answer. Go back to our first observation. They had a knee-jerk reaction in the 1970s. They don't know how to talk about sex in the church. And they're going to save America by saving homosexuals. And guess what? It ain't going to work that way. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.